When you're a snot-nosed kid, it's very hard to shut up. But one thing that would make you shut up is cartoons. Sure, you could go to Disney and watch some original banger movies of chimps doing sign language, or watch the live-action Nickelodeon shows. Or actually, you probably shouldn't. But my point is, there was just something special about the cartoons. A lot of cartoons are remembered to this day, like SpongeBob, Adventure Time, Regular Show. Those are all cartoons remembered fondly. But what about the cartoons that kind of feel like a fever dream? The cartoons that air for a little bit and then mysteriously disappear, and you just kind of wonder, hey, whatever happened to almost naked animals? Did this show even exist? Should it have even existed? Am I hallucinating or something? I'm talking shows like Uncle Grandpa, Fanboy and Chum Chum, which is probably the reason I have a couple missing brain cells. Seriously, this was like OG brain rot. There was zero educational value in that show. It was great. Sanjay and Craig, Clarence, which is one of the best slice of life shows of all time. In Cartoon Network's favorite boy with majestic, porcupine, spiky blonde hair. No, not that one. I'm talking the kid with a head of fiery hair and a turbocharged backpack. Johnny frickin' Test. Johnny Test had brilliant animation marked with some wacky characters like Bling Bling Boy, his two genius sisters, and Dookie the dog. I would list some of these character traits, but come on, I can't even remember what I had for breakfast this morning, let alone a Canadian cartoon that aired for like 4 seasons. But on the other end of the spectrum, you had Nickelodeon, and Nickelodeon saw the success of Adventure Time and Regular Show that they wanted to make their own duo show. And most of these shows were all really bad and forgettable. Like I mentioned earlier, Fanboy and Chum Chum, Sanjay and Craig. These shows had pretty much no educational value and were just kind of brain rot, and that's what made them so great. If you were one of them families who only watched PBS Kids, these type of shows were probably the reason that happened. How am I going to do basic fractions or a 2-sentence report on if you give a mouse a cookie in the 3rd grade if I'm watching this type of stuff when I get home from school? While I was looking at Fanboy and Chum Chum, under it was a whole haven of these forgettable shows. Wild Grinders, Back at the Barnyard, Planet Sheen. A lot of these shows, sure, they were forgettable and sure, they were pretty bad, but they had potential and decent premises. Like, for example, Back at the Barnyard. That was stemmed from the movie of Back in the Barnyard, and the movie was actually pretty good. I mean, I remember it was kind of a banger back in the day. Probably still as good to this day. These were the shows that would come on when you take a day off from school as a sick day. They were kind of like a prize for not dying. I mean, these shows would air for the whole day because you know all the kids are at school. So you don't really need to show the big guns, the banger shows. These were the type of shows that would make you contemplate changing the channel to watch Jerry Springer or Judge Judy. They were that bad. But who am I kidding? As a kid, I enjoyed these shows. But at the end of the day, they just couldn't really stand the test of time on the network, I guess you could say. Thank you for tuning in. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Or don't. I'm not your dad. Adios.